Never stop reading Bible. Welcome. In today's explainer, we're diving into one of the oldest stories there is about a global crisis. It's a really powerful narrative about how a brand new world went so wrong so fast, and the incredible plan that involved both total destruction and an amazing deliverance. So, let's start with this question. It's a big one, right? What happens when a new world goes wrong? Imagine you've got this perfect, fresh start, just bursting with potential. But then, what happens when it all starts to fall apart, almost right away? That's really the core idea we're going to unpack here. All right, so the story of how this world started to decay, it doesn't begin with some huge war or a clash of nations. Nope. It starts much smaller, much more personal. It starts within the very first family, with a betrayal that's going to set a terribly dark precedent for everything that follows. And here it is, the first murder, Cain, killing his brother Abel. But this story frames it as so much more than just a crime. It's really presented as the first awful symptom of a much deeper problem, a corruption that's taken root. It shows us how quickly things like jealousy and rage can just spiral into absolute catastrophe. You see, this wasn't just some one-off, isolated act of violence. It was a starting point. It actually sets the stage for a whole new cultural direction. Cain's family goes on to build the very first city, and they establish a society that's basically defined by its own rules, its own ambitions, getting further and further from where it all began. So, almost immediately, humanity splits onto these two very different tracks. On one side, you've got the line of Cain. It's marked by this culture of vengeance, building a world entirely for themselves. But then, on the other side, a new line emerges through Adam's other son, Seth. And this line is all about making a conscious effort to reconnect with God. So you have two families heading in two totally different directions. Okay, so while one part of humanity was really spiraling downward, there was this other thread, a thread of hope that was being carefully kept alive, passed down from one generation to the next. Now, this timeline, it's not just a boring list of names. You've got to see it as a lifeline, a genealogy of hope. We go through 10 patriarchs, starting with Adam and going all the way down to Noah. And through them, a faithful heritage is somehow maintained, even with all the chaos growing around them. There's even a special shout out for Enoch, who, as it says, walked with God. He had this incredibly close relationship. The key takeaway here is that no matter how dark the world got, this little light was never completely put out.
But, despite that glimmer of hope, the overwhelming trend was just decay. And this brings us to a really dramatic turning point in the story, where the perspective shifts from what's happening on Earth to the divine view from above. So, by this point, that problem that started with just one murder, it had spread like a virus. The entire world was just filled with violence. Corruption was everywhere. The whole experiment, it looked like it had gone horribly, horribly wrong.
Wow, I mean, that is such a heavy statement. It doesn't talk about some cold, distant judge. It talks about profound sadness, about grief. The creator's reaction is described as being heartbroken over the state of the very world that had been made. And in the middle of all that grief, a decision is made. But here's the thing, judgment isn't immediate. This number, 120, it's a countdown. It's a final grace period. A 120-year window before a final decisive intervention is going to take place. So what was this big intervention going to be? Well, the plan had two parts. It involved a terrifying judgment on all the world's corruption, but at the same time, it was also this incredible act of salvation, and it all centered on one man from that unbroken, faithful line. That man is Noah. And just look at the job he's given. He's told to build a gigantic boat, an ark, to save not only his family, but pairs of every single living creature from a flood that is going to completely reset the world. I mean, this is a rescue mission on a scale that is just mind-boggling. So for 120 years, while the rest of the world just kept doing its thing, Noah was working on this unbelievable project. And now we get to the climax of the whole story. Those final moments before everything changes forever. You can just feel the tension and the finality in these steps. First, Noah and his family get on board. Then all the animals follow. And then comes this incredibly dramatic moment. The single door to the ark is shut. That's it. The time for making a choice is over. And then it happens. The great flood begins. This is an event unlike anything the world had ever seen or would ever see again. The 120-year grace period is over, and the judgment has begun. As the waters rise higher and higher, covering absolutely everything, only one thing is left, floating on the surface of this drowned world: the Ark. The very thing that was a project of faith for over a century now becomes the only vessel of salvation for the entire future of life on Earth. So the flood is like a total reset, right? A washing clean of a corrupt world. But it leaves us with this huge question to think about. When you save a small piece of humanity to start all over again, what parts of that old, broken world do they bring with them inside the Ark?
It's just such a powerful story of decline and deliverance, and it really raises as many questions as it answers. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. This has been a presentation of the Center Studio.